thank you for joining us. We're here visiting with Darrin Parmenter, who is the Colorado State University Extension Agent for La Plata County. And Darrin's here to talk to us about his experience with the COVID-19 infection. Darrin, thanks for joining us, and tell us a little bit about what you know about COVID personally.
So yeah, we think that we know where I got it at. We had a meeting in the middle of March, and at that meeting there was about 12 or 14 people, and of those we are seeing probably 5 or 6 that either tested positive for COVID or had a positive antibody test. So that's my guess where I got it. You know, the irony is I was texting my wife during that meeting about trying to find toilet paper. She was going from store to store trying to find toilet paper, and there was a rumor that somebody in La Plata County had tested positive. So this was even before we had one positive test. You know, it became kind of a long, drawn-out process of I didn't feel anything for a couple of days, and then started to feel pretty punky. And then my symptoms were not typical of what you see in the news or what you hear people having. I never had a fever. I never got the fever. I never had a really awful cough. But I definitely had that kind of fluish, just feeling really down, really low energy. And it got into my lungs, and that's when it got kind of sketchy. Kind of felt like somebody was sitting on my lungs 24 hours a day. And then doing blood oxygen tests, you know, my blood oxygen was down in the low to mid 80s, which apparently is not good. I talked to my doctor. She said, you need to come into the hospital, do a series of x-rays. So I went there, and, you know, the doctor's like, you may have COVID, but we can't test. We don't have any tests available. I was called, or they called me presumed positive, just because based off of my symptoms, my x-rays. So it got to the point where I just assumed that I had it. And at that point, I began the whole lovely quarantine process at the house.
So about how long did that whole ordeal take you?
It felt like a year and a half, but I'm guessing it was probably 3 or 4 weeks. I know for at least 17 days, I was in my bedroom for about 98% of the time. We had our kids there, and because I had come in contact with them, they were in quarantine. And then ironically, we're trying to get my daughter home. She was in Denmark for an exchange trip.
Oh, wow.
So there was this added level of just tension of trying to get her home, trying to fly her home. Everything was canceled.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the range of symptoms, because we've spoken to quite a few people throughout this series, and everybody has had a slightly to widely varying experience. So.
And then you start to feel that weird kind of mind messing with you of, do I actually taste this, or do I not taste this, or
right.
Can I actually I can't tell if I can smell this or not. And so you start to really freak yourself out.
Sure.
And I like, one of my worst symptoms were nightmares. Like at night, like my night terrors were out of this world, where, you know, at that time my wife was sleeping downstairs in another bed. She'd come up and I'm gripping the sheets, and it was scary. So that was one of these weird kind of side effects of all this. And I didn't even have a fever. I was blessed that I had a caretaker. Like, I had someone who was giving me 3 meals a day and making sure I was drinking water and making sure I was doing the herbs and the supplements and doing my blood oxygen and, you know, trying to strengthen my lungs back up. There's people out there who have nobody. That's the people that, you know, through all of this, you know, the millions of people who have come down with this, there's a lot of people who have no one to help them. And that's super scary, I would think.
So you mentioned that this all happened very early on in the pandemic, obviously before we went to stay at home or any of the mask mandates or any of that. So what, if any, precautions were you taking at that time to avoid the virus?
Yeah, we were hyper vigilant for sure.
Okay.
We were, but not at that meeting. You know, that meeting was kind of like this whole discussion about, are we really doing this? So this was before, to my knowledge, and I don't think I'm ignorant on it, any mandates came out of you should be wearing a mask, you should be wearing a glove. It was all still pretty loosely defined as to what this kind of virus looked like. Once it was, you know, again, ironically, after this meeting, when we started to try to maybe stockpile some dry goods or whatever it is in the house. That was when, it was for all the kids and my wife and I, it was a mask, it was gloves, it was all of those things.
So since you've recovered and we're kind of seeing second waves or not certain how the virus is going to behave in people who have already recovered from it, has that changed how you're trying to protect yourself and your family?
No, so I am still going every day, thinking that I am still susceptible to this, that I can still get it. And that's how we have to live our lives. My wife she's a fourth grade teacher. So, she's in a mask 7 hours a day. She's hyper vigilant about washing hands, about, using hand sanitizer, keeping clean, changing clothes, all of those things. So our house is relatively tight. What's going to happen when these temperatures start to drop? And who knows? We're fearful. So, we're just trying to be outside as much as we possibly can, trying to keep our bubble small, keep our kids within their own cohorts or their small friend groups. And just try to beat this before winter comes.
So having been through all that, both as a personal sufferer of the COVID-19 and also somebody who's trying to keep a family safe and working in high contact environments, what advice do you have for the community heading into the winter months about how to keep themselves safe?
And I think there's two parts of whatever's happening with us. There's the safety for health, both mental health as well as physical health, and then there's just like the safety and the overall wellness of our community. So part of this is still just trying to be kind to each other, right? Like, I may wear a mask all the time, someone may not wear a mask. I'm still trying to be kind to that person. Hopefully they can be trying kind to me. Everything right now as we're trying to deal with this before an election is just so ramped up and it's so tense. So to me, as someone who grew up in Durango or third generation here, like, this is our community, this is our home. Like, these are the same people that we've shared meals with and shared a beer with and gone camping with and, worked with, and our parents have worked with each other. And to me, that one of those biggest things is just still trying to be patient and kind with each other. And that's where I see a lot of us really failing, and that's what really scares me.
Yeah.
The other piece is we are still going into this knowing that we're seeing numbers ramp up. Now all of a sudden we're at over 350 cases-ish here in Plata County, where just a few weeks ago we were at 270. Numbers have definitely increased. So we are going into this with that same sense of safety. We're masking up whenever we're in public. We're trying to limit, what we do in social settings. Our kids are essentially, they go to school, they do some extracurriculars that we feel like are safe, and then they come home. So that's kind of our premise, and our kids kind of hate us for that. But, I also know that they have seen what's happened to somebody. Right, like they knew that I had a tough time breathing. They knew that I probably should have been in the hospital but refused to go. They saw their dad on a bed for 14 days. So the one upside of that is I think that they have a better understanding of what this does to people.
Great. Well, thanks, Darrin. That's all I had for you. Is there anything else you want to throw in there?
No, thank you guys for doing this. I appreciate it, for sure. And hopefully this will be the last one because no one else will get it.